Welcome everyone, Joe with ECRM here at our sessions in Germany, and with me is Nicholas Hall of the Nicholas Hall Group of Companies. He gave a great and fun presentation yesterday.
Thank you,
We're
Joe.
going to focus on a few key takeaways from that presentation. So thanks for joining us and thanks for the presentation. And a couple of things really jumped out at me from it. In the beginning, when you were given the overview of macroeconomic trends, so you were talking about how birth rates are going down all over the world, yet we have an older population and a less healthy population. And that really points out that there is a big need for consumer healthcare products. However, there's not as much innovation in that segment as there could be. So can you give a little background on that? And we'll dive into some of the things, opportunities that they present.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. It's an interesting topic, and I'm pleased you've picked it out because I'm a baby boomer. And when I grew up, there was a high birth rate. People died when they were about 70. They worked till they were 65, and they had 5 years of leisure, and they enjoyed basically very good health until the day they died. Now what happens is that people are retiring earlier, but they're living longer. We have a record number of people who live to the age of 100. The oldest person in the world is a British person, 116 years old. What happens, though, that over the last few years, changes in society with poor exercise, poor diet, and substance abuse, alcohol, hard drugs, and whatever, means that people live a long, unhealthy life. Now, most of that involves hospitalization, prescription drugs, but the consumer market has a role to play. Now, we haven't fully defined it yet, and I'm an advocate going around talking meetings like yours, Joe, in which we say there's an opportunity for us. This is an industry that's always looking for opportunities, but continues to launch the same old. More painkillers, more products for an upset stomach. And we don't go into these new categories. An emerging category are a large number of older consumers who are going to live for 20 years in poor health, and we should be marketing the products that make them more comfortable. So falling birth rate means that the market for children's products is looking not as great as it did in the past. And then just to comment on innovation, we're an industry that, and I'm talking about consumer health, we're an industry that prides itself on innovation. Now, we have a product called Tracker, and we've in 13 years measured 52,000 new products that have come to market, and less than 5% of those are innovative. The other 95% are Me Too's. And you don't build an industry on Me Too's. You don't fulfill your promise on innovation by just bringing a cherry flavored version of what's already there. So my message, I'm the sort of industry gadfly. I go around and say, you're doing great, but you're not doing great enough. And here are ways forward. And maybe we'll get into some of those ways forward in a moment.
Yeah. And you pointed out, take them through the star rating system that you use, because I thought that was really interesting, and it really pointed out, because people bandy about that term innovation, but they'll consider, adding a new flavor is innovation. It's not really innovation. No. So how do you rank them?
So when we identify a new product, and this is before it's got any sales numbers attached to it, we apply a 4-star rating system. So a brand that opens up a completely new category, like 10 years ago, the first CBD products coming to market, they'll get a 4-star. A product that is a very interesting launch, a game changer within an existing category, a new, much better acting pain reliever, for example, that's a 3-star. Now, those two together are what I call innovation. And they account historically, over the 13 years we've been doing this, for less than 5%. But in the last year, that's down to 3%.
Wow.
Which means that in the last year, 97% of the products that launched were either 2-star, which means a Me Too with a small point of difference, or a 1-star, which means it's exactly the same. I use this expression, I wonder why the brand manager got out of bed that morning. It just wasn't worth it.
Yeah. And what's interesting is you talked about health span versus lifespan, and health span is a lot shorter. People are living sick, but there is an interest in those products that make them feel comfortable, but also longevity focus. Because I know, like, health and wellness started gaining traction before the pandemic, but the pandemic really accelerated it. And I know certainly for myself, during that time, I started really focusing on longevity. Like, what can I do now to make my 70s and 80s a lot better? And there's, I think, a lot of opportunities product-wise to address that. Are you seeing development in those areas?
Yeah, now we're a global company, and where we see this happening best is in Asia, where people have always lived longer. I mean, the country with the most centenarians, people who've passed 100 years of age, is Japan. It's partly the diet, it's partly the sort of the inner philosophy of the Japanese. And I remember a conference we did in Shanghai. We had a speaker in China. We had a speaker from one of the biggest market research agencies in Japan. He said, you talk about the market for older consumers. In fact, there are three markets. There's the older consumer still at work. And what they're looking for are the types of products that can get them to work, that are going to overcome the lack of energy, who are going to keep them from picking up small illnesses. Then there's the retired folk who are hyperactive. They're going on cruise, they're going on high altitude walks, they're playing golf, whatever it is. And they actually need the same sort of medication with a few twists that the working old.
Yeah.
But then you get the people who are sadly in the departure suite. These are people waiting to die. And that used to be 2 to 3 years. Now it can be 10, 15 years. And I'm not talking about people who are chronically sick. I'm talking about the majority of the population. And our industry has a major opportunity to create a new kind of lifestyle comfort products. You know, our industry is never going to have the cure for Alzheimer's. Indeed, there is no cure for Alzheimer's, but we can make people with Alzheimer's more comfortable. Diabetics, which is not in the same way a killer necessarily, but people with diabetes, they have things like impaired vision, they have sort of certain ulcers on the skin, all sorts of issues. We should be bringing products, long lines of products for the diabetic, not just food, but long lines of comfort products. I've seen one brand that was taken off the market by Sanofi in Australia. Nowhere else do I see those products. Individual products, but not a range. So the diabetic can literally, or the diabetic carer can go to the store, come home with a basket of 20 products that are going to make that person comfortable, whatever comes during the month.
Gotcha. Talk a little bit about brains and beauty, because you mentioned that, and that was kind of where they're at, where they're focused now, right?
Brains and beauty?
Brains and beauty.
Right. So two very different categories. So mental acuity, which is that we can concentrate better, that we don't lose our memory. Going into the specifics of autism, Asperger's syndrome, ADHD, we have products that can help. One I worked on to try to get into Japan is an optimum blend of omega-3, omega-6 and some natural vitamins. Huge. It's called Equus and IQ. They're not clients of ours, so I can say this in a very neutral way. Fantastic product. I took it every day. I took it this morning. Okay. I always take my capsule. Maybe it's one of the reasons that even at my advanced years, I can remember your name, Fred. Anyway, so that's the brains area, and I would say that it's huge. There are some interesting brands around the world, but no brand has taken over that space. Now, beauty is just, can we achieve our vanity through supplements, beauty from within? And that's a tricky area. I mean, big companies like Nestle, L'Oreal have tried and failed, but there are some entrepreneurs who get good sales because they didn't have such high expectations. And they produced, whereas those other companies wanted brands of $500 million, these companies, the more entrepreneurial ones, but the realistic ones, think, well, 50 million is not bad. So we're seeing a lot in this space. But at the heart of your question, I think, is the fact that we used to think of consumer health as just 6 major categories, or 5 major categories. It was pain, it was upset stomach, it was cough and cold, it was derma. And then you had vitamins, minerals, and supplements, which was a sort of catch-all, and it's our biggest. And then lifestyle products. Now we realize it's infinite. I mean, we had the presentation yesterday at your conference about menopause, which the lady said is the next big thing, and I don't disagree about that. It exists, but we don't have products for it. Now, her organization is building awareness of that. But there are so many unmet demand. I mean, sleep, something as simple as sleep. The World Health Organization has declared Western Europe has a pandemic for poor sleep.
Yeah.
And yet we do not have the products that can give people a good night, an early night's sleep, undisturbed sleep, wake refreshed. We're searching for those products. They don't exist in pharma because they're addictive. The natural products are okay, but they don't have the efficacy. Melatonin is an RX substance in the UK and low dose in the rest of Europe. No player has really taken that by the scruff of the neck and done the research and development, the clinical work, and then the marketing work to make that a multi-billion category.
Yeah,
and we need it.
Sleep is so underrated because if you fix that problem, a lot of the other problems cease to exist.
Absolutely.
The cognitive issues, the energy and all that.
Brains and beauty.
Brains and beauty.
If you get a good night's sleep, you're halfway there.
Yep. And then it's nutrition is important too. You eat well, you work out, you get good sleep. 3 pillars. You do that, it really fixes a lot of things.
Whereas the reality is, in this highly informed, relatively prosperous society that we live in, is we have poor diet. It's getting worse with all the sort of the products that are manufactured quick and tasty, but they're full of additives. We don't get the sleep, and we don't exercise enough.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned the Blue Zones before, because I watched that the Blue Zones series on Netflix. We have Okinawa, Ikaria, Sardinia, Loma Linda, and Nicoya, Costa Rica. And what's sad is that at the end of each one, they showed how the Blue Zone's getting smaller, how they had all of these centenarians, but now as they're starting to eat fast food, they're starting to get away from their traditional lifestyles, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Well, genetics plays a part in this because you mentioned Sardinia, but there are a series of mountains in mainland Italy where people live to a large number of them reach 100, and yet they have the most terrible diet. They're eating fatty foods, they don't exercise, but it's in the genes to live a long life. So there's part of this key that we don't understand and will never understand, and even if we find out, we can't change it. But the rest of us who live the conventional busy lives, we can do so much. And it's as you were saying, Joe, that you've been looking for a long time now at ways of preserving your life in the future. I'm already there and not doing too bad, but we all want to live to 100 and we all want to be very busy. And I think of my role model is Sir David Attenborough, who's 96 and still making TV programs.
And still hiking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just shows what you can do if you've got what in my day was called RMA, right mental attitude.
Yeah, just keep going. And there's one guy I knew who was in his 90s, very active. And I said, what's your secret? He said, just mind and body active all the time. Don't stop.
Absolutely.
So now with this in this context, right, you have a bunch of to-dos you talked about for brands. Can you walk through some of those?
Yeah, we've got 10 to-dos. Some of them are very inward. For example, the last one is, and this is very much talking about organization with our industry and financial models, but as we've raised it, it's don't sacrifice the future for today as a business, because a lot of companies are going for short-term profits, and in a way they're eating the seed corn. They're not doing the R&D, they're not doing the clinical work, they're cutting advertising campaigns, and that's great. You'll make your numbers next month, but you might not have a great business in 5 years' time. So I always say, balance the two. Yes, you've got to make target today. On the other hand, you want a business in the future, because the one thing I know, having had my company for over 40 years, is that what looks like long-term planning comes around very quickly. And all those decisions you put off 5 years ago, because 5 years off is a long time, and now we're on. It's 5 years, 10 years past, and we didn't do what we should have done. But coming back to the more consumer-centric part is, first and foremost, let's be very honest. This is a market for women. Women actually consume 62%, even though they're 49% of the population or 51% in some parts of the world. They consume 62% of all consumer healthcare products. They purchase about 85 to 90%, and they're the information giver within the family. And yet we do not take women seriously as a market. I think in the Domestically, we take them very serious because they nag us otherwise. Sorry, cut that out of the talk. But the fact of the matter is that as a demographic, we just say, oh yeah, we're going to market our products to women, higher education, higher income, age 25 to 34. Well, it's a bit more than that. You have to really segment your market. You have to do the market research. You have to talk to women and find out what they really want. And I thought there was a great presentation you had yesterday from the Gen M lady with that wonderful accreditation program for menopause products. So one is queen consumer. Never forget the needs of queen consumer. Secondly, I think is, and this goes on the findings from our tracker, 52,000 products launched, of which only 3% currently are innovative. Let's look for some points of difference. Let's take the time, let's spend the money on the R&D, on the clinical work. Let's get products which bring new benefits to the consumer, which we can protect with some IP, and frankly, where we make some claims, which for many of our products, we can't make claims. And then I'd say, let's understand that this is a local market. The products, take a famous brand like Tylenol, the brand that President Trump is saying, do not consume. The fact of the matter is, it's in its day, it's now not as big as it used to be, but in its day, it was the biggest OTC drug in the world, but it was only sold in about 8 countries because they try. We're in Germany. At the moment, we're at Frankfurt Airport having this conference, this wonderful conference. J&J, Johnson & Johnson, tried 3 or 4 times to launch into the German market and they couldn't get in here. And the reason was their product is paracetamol. They would call it acetaminophen. But the market in Germany is all about aspirin and ibuprofen and combination products. But it was more than that. Consumers in Germany have been buying pain relievers. In fact, pain relievers were invented in Germany. So what can you tell the Germans about pain relief? Johnson & Johnson couldn't tell them anything. And it's a great company, one of my biggest clients, so I mustn't be rude about them. I don't want to be rude about them. And this is a local market, and it's very hard to make brands travel. But we should try, because unless you can market your brand with scale, you don't get the economies of scale, of production, of marketing, of administration, which can give us, and just to make numbers, or just to quote numbers, a few years ago, 15% net profit in an OTC business was considered to get good. Now companies want 25%. The way they get there is by cutting costs, and that sometimes eats not only to the fat, but it eats into the flesh. We need to grow the business. We need to get more consumers, more happy consumers, prepared in some instances to pay premium prices. So this is the mission. This is what I and my 64 colleagues go around the world telling our audience, sometimes working with consumer groups, but mainly with trade groups, and saying there is a better way to market your products.
Great, and you have a conference coming up next year. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we have a conference in Berlin. We looked at 2 areas. We looked at Munich, which is very nice. We've had a conference before. We've been in Berlin. But after the recent run of success since the pandemic, we were in Athens, then in London, then in Rome, then in Paris. The next venue, next April, is in Berlin. We typically have 200 people. It's a very different type of meeting to yours, Joe. I mean, yours is speed dating, putting together buyers and sellers. That's great. I admire that, and I'm very impressed with what you've achieved here. Ours is much more the traditional presentations, Q&A sessions, panel discussions, networking opportunities, and a night out on the town, which these days is never what it used to be. I mean, in the old days when we had conferences in LATAM, it was literally you never got to bed. Yeah. But now everyone wants to be safely asleep.
That's sleep. We talked about that.
Sleep. Absolutely. And we're not as young as we used to be.
Yeah.
So that's it. So anyone who wants to come and see a new slant on consumer healthcare, we're in Berlin. Get in touch with us, and we'll send you all the details. The agenda's still cooking, so we don't have a final agenda, but we'll have that in about a month.
And you'll be speaking there too.
I'll do the keynote. That's my They wheel me out in my wheelchair to do the keynote speech, but it's not me. It's not even our team. It's the experts who come in. We also have an award scheme: the most innovative new product, the most impressive marketing campaign, the e-commerce activities that have really impressed us. And we do that for all our global meetings. We just were in New Jersey 2 weeks ago. We'll be in Singapore in November. And we do an online conference for Latin America. But one of our very early businesses conferences. We love it.
Excellent. You've been doing it like 20 years, I think, that conference?
No, the one in Europe is number 36 in the series,
Wow.
including 2 years we missed because of the pandemic. So we've been in this business a long time. Although I've learned a lot from your conference. There are some things I'm going to go back to the troops and say, you know how they do it? And I love this that you're doing. We film, my son runs a film unit, and we do, but it tends to be more talking heads. I like your interactive way of doing it.
Awesome. Well, yeah, a lot of moving parts in the background,
Sure.
but yeah, it's a seamless experience. So
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much for your presentation,
It's
and
a
I
pleasure,
enjoyed
Joe.
this conversation.
Thanks a lot, Joe. Good luck with everything.
All right, you too.